Ecclesiastes chapter 4, and I left off yesterday in verse number 8. There is one alone, and there is not a second. Yea, he hath neither child nor brother, yet is there no end of all his labor, neither is his eye satisfied with riches. Neither saith he, For whom do I labor and bereave my soul of good? This is also vanity, yea, it is a sore travail. Now, it is my estimation that this text has called into question a common area of postmodern society. And it is this scripture written almost 1,000 years before the birth of Christ, some 3,000 years ago, is as up to date and down to earth as anything you'll read in the newspaper or anything you'll see on the television tonight whenever you get home after work. There is one alone, and there is not a second. What a tragic thing for a man or a woman to be alone. I think it's the will of God for men to marry wives and to produce offspring with those wives. One of the greatest things in my life, in fact the greatest apart from being saved, was when I married my wife, and then greater still was when my wife many decades ago gave to me my children, and now my children are giving to me grandchildren. And I hope, and the way things look now, I will never be alone. I appreciate my wife and the companionship. We've been married for 36 years, and we're now working in our 37th year of marriage. And my children now, my daughter is 31 years of age, my son is approaching 30, and now I'm watching them have their families and produce their offspring. And I hope to live to be an old man. I'd like to live to be real old. And my grandchildren and my great-grandchildren care for me and be concerned about me and try to provide for me. I can't imagine, I just can't imagine a man my age, a middle-aged man, that is never married and never had children, never produced offspring, and then one day he, like me, the time starts catching up with him, and you know, the next thing, if the next 20 years go by as fast as the last 20, I'm going to fool around here and be an old man. And I'm already perceived by some people as being an old man, and I'm going to mess around and really become old. I mean, I'm going to start considering myself to be an old man. And that's a glorious thing for a man or a woman to live to be old. I think that's nothing could be better than that. But nothing could be more tragic than for a man or a woman to live to be old and discover they are by themselves. In the days of my youth, when I first married my wife, and I had somebody to share my home with, and someone to share my love with, and someone to share my burdens with, and how wonderful that was. Then the children came along, and now grandchildren coming along. And it's a wonderful thing to not be alone. There are very few times when I'm in my house and I'm alone. Just very few times when I'm there. When I'm at the office where I do my recording, where I am now, recording for the radio. I always like for people to be in the office. It's not any fun being at the office alone. I like for other people to be here. There is one alone. There is not a second. He doesn't have a wife or a spouse or a woman. She doesn't have a husband. Yea, he hath neither child nor brother. How tragic that would be, to not be able to produce offspring, not to have children to be produced. How sad it would be for a man to be destitute of brother and sister. Sometimes families are just the way things work out. I'm not condemning anybody. And sometimes couples marry and they're not able to have children for one reason or another, but they have brothers and sisters in their family, in their family circle. How tragic it would be for there to be neither child nor brother. Yet is there no end of all his labor. Now, it's at this point that I think the text strikes at the heart of postmodern society. Our people have been taught an idea and a doctrine by a popular culture that you need to pursue a career, you need to work your fingers to the bone. Now, when I make that statement, I'm not promoting sloth and laziness. Those of you that have heard me on the radio for years and years know that I decry laziness and sloth and waste and things of that nature. I despise that. Paul said, if a man won't work, neither should he eat. But we have been given a philosophy, and popular culture has taught us, and I think wrongly, that a man is to give himself and a woman is to give herself to the acquisition of things. Yet is there no end of all his labor. And I have heard the testimony of men and women both that said, during my young years I got into the rat race of climbing the corporate ladder and chasing after the corporate dream, and the first thing you know, I was 30 years old and not married and not dating. Some of them have stated might have had a series of boyfriends and girlfriends or one-night stands, but nothing permanent, nothing that is taught by the Bible, nothing godly. The first thing you know, you're 40, and then the next thing you know, you turn around, you're 50, and you're all by yourself. You've never married, and at this point, probably never will marry. And there is no end of all their labor. They married their work. They gave themselves to the corporation. They gave themselves to climbing the corporate ladder. But the problem is, neither is his eye satisfied with riches. You ask a man that has $1 million in the bank, what would you like to have? And he'll say, another million. You ask a man that has $2 million in the bank, what would you like to have? And he'll say, I'd like to have 2 more. That's $4 million. You ask a man with $4 million in the bank, what would you like to have? And he'll say, I'd like to have $8 million in the bank. Neither is his eye satisfied with riches. Solomon, who wrote the book of Ecclesiastes, said in the book of Proverbs, the eyes of man are never satisfied. I've heard men say, if I could just have that, that would satisfy me. Not according to the Bible, it wouldn't. The eyes of man are never satisfied. In fact, you can't see things until you start moving in that direction. You build a 2,000 square foot house, and all of a sudden you discover that you need an extra 1,000 square feet. And you would have never known that while you lived in the 1,200 square foot house that you and your wife lived in. The eyes of man are never satisfied. And as you continue going up the ladder, somebody said, well, I would just like to have an airplane. And you get an airplane, and all of a sudden you say, well, I'd like to have one that's faster. And then you get it, and you say, well, I'd like to have one that's a little bigger. And then you get it, and you say, well, now I'd like to have one with it's a twin engine job. And you get that, and you say, if I just had a small Learjet. And you get that, and then you say, well, if I had a better Learjet. The eyes of man are never satisfied. I'm not condemning. No, I'm not condemning at all. I'm dealing with a problem that I read here in the King James Bible. There is one alone, and there's not another. Now, how sad it will be for a man to come down to the end of his life, and he's worked all of his life, and he has neither child nor brother. He is all by himself. He lives alone. He hasn't had a good wife to share his nice home with, and to share his automobile with, and to share his life with. He's not had a wife to give him children and give him offspring. And he winds up toward the end of his life, and there's no end of all his labor, and his eye is not satisfied with riches. He has a very nice Learjet, but he wants one a little newer, a little bigger, or a little faster. Neither saith he, for whom do I labor, and bereave my soul of good? I've told my children more often now as I have reached the station in my life. I've told my children on a number of occasions, you need to know what your dad does for a living, and you need to know what your dad has, because one day you're going to inherit all of this, and you're going to have to know how to run it. And one day you're going to be doing what your dad has been doing. And while my children, and I'm not criticizing them, but while my children have been living their life and quote unquote, as we say in the vernacular, doing their thing, their dad has been over here laboring. And I've been laboring so that I can have to give, I can have to tithe, I support the Bright Spot Hour, and I have money to give away to people that have needs, and you know, I'm able to eat. I can go to the grocery store and buy groceries, and I can keep the lights on at my house. But the accumulation of things are going to be my children's. I'm going to give it to my children. But what if I didn't have any children? And there are tens of thousands of people in the United States now that have no offspring. What are they going to do? The other day, the Bright Spot Hour was remembered in a will. In fact, just a little while ago, I was on the phone with an attorney, and this lady had no children, no offspring, no children. And she divided up her estate among 3 ministries. Not a large estate, but I'm grateful for what it is. And the Bright Spot Hour was named as one of those estates. For whom do I labor and bereave my soul of good? If I have no children to leave what I have labored for, to leave behind for them to enjoy in the course of their life. Now my time is gone. By the grace of God, I'll be back on tomorrow.
Hour at Post Office Box 4, Greenville, South Carolina 29602.